Hello and most welcome to the continuation of Heidegger 1630, Wittgenstein, Rethinking the Inner by Paul Johnston. And we've been discussing a fantastic example with tennis in the bottom. Well, that could be used as a sort of a model for understanding the relation or the possible misunderstanding of inner and outer. The imaginary tennis game. And I will reread this, for this is just an excellent pointer to understanding. This game, the tennis game, is identical to ordinary tennis, except that the players have to form certain images while they play. This imposes a new demand on them, and it might be objected that it is one that is too easily eluded, since only the individual herself can say whether she is following the rules. Let us suppose, however, that all the players are totally honest. The important question is the status of the inner move. Quote, what sort of move is the inner move of the game? What does it consist in? In this, that, according to the rule, he forms an image of. But might it not also be said, we do not know what kind of inner move of the game he performs according to the rule. We only know its manifestations. The inner move of the game is an X. Whose nature we do not know. Or again, here too there are only external moves of the game. The communication of the rule and what is called the manifestation of the inner process. Here we have 3 descriptions of the move, all of which Wittgenstein accepts as possible. One person compares the inner move to a move in an ordinary sense. Another stresses the differences and rejects this comparison. There are only external moves, one could say. While the third compares it to an action which happens in secret and which no one but the agent herself knows. That is, the inner move is an X. The issue, however, is not which of these descriptions is accurate. For X hypothesis, they all describe the same reality. Rather, what matters is that we are not misled, that we see the dangers of the expression inner move of the game. It is dangerous because it produces confusion. As this illustration shows, Wittgenstein's aim is neither to affirm nor to deny the inner, but simply to clarify the precise nature of the concepts it involves. Despite this, one could still argue that this approach is inherently rationalistic. For example, someone might claim that the private language argument clashes with our sense that the deepest experiences are incommunicable. So does not Wittgenstein in this sense deny or at least distort the inner? But what exactly are the experiences Wittgenstein is supposed to be denying? If there are private, indescribable experiences, how strange that we can talk about them and that others can know what we mean. In fact, Wittgenstein's account of language and its role in the inner allows us to understand how words can be used not just to express common experiences we all share, but also to capture the rare and the unique. The example of literature and poetry, in particular, shows how what seems inexpressible can nonetheless gain expression. Similarly, in everyday life, an image or a phrase may somehow capture a complex thought or feeling which cannot otherwise cannot be otherwise expressed or explained. Here, what would be rationalistic would be to claim that all communication and self-expression must be on the basis of public definitions and agreed rules. Wittgenstein, however, shows how our relation to language enable us to go beyond such definitions and use language to give spontaneous expression to what we feel. Far from ruling out statements such as everything I do feels somehow new to me, or I feel a burden on my soul which nothing can shake off. Wittgenstein presents them as important examples of how language operates when the inner is being expressed. Here it is interesting to contrast Wittgenstein's later position with the views he held during the period of his early philosophy, for then he held that our most profound experiences could not be captured in language. In his lecture on ethics, for example, he discussed the religious experience expressed in the utterance, "I feel as if whatever happens, no harm can come to me," and concluded that such expressions were nonsensical since the individual cannot explain what they mean. Although the individual may be safe from the threat of being struck by lightning, or safe from the threat of an avalanche, she cannot be safe tout court. Later, however, Wittgenstein recognized that the demand for explanation is misguided. Not all language works through agreed rules. Rather, words can be like gestures and have a direct and unique meaning which cannot be paraphrased. Just as music can express much we cannot explain, so too can language. Acceptance that language operates on different levels and in different ways makes it possible to understand and accept the full range of human self-expression. Far from constraining the inner in a rationalistic straitjacket, Wittgenstein offers the only account which enables us to make full sense of it. His claim that inner states stand in need of outward criteria is not a limitation on the world of experience, but simply a reminder that the idea of an experience which in principle has no expression is a philosophical illusion. If someone says, "I cannot describe what I feel at the moment," that too is an utterance, and it is possible that the individual may later find words to describe it, even if she does not. Her actions or her other words may give us some idea of what she is feeling, or we may simply recognize that she is in that state we too sometimes experience, where the power of our emotion is such that we can find no appropriate expression for it. Wittgenstein has no need or desire to deny the possibility of indescribable experiences. All he does is point out that these two can only play a role in our lives insofar as they manifest themselves in some way or another. A different way of expressing the idea that Wittgenstein is denying the inner is to claim that he reduces everything to behavior. However, Wittgenstein's stress on the criterial link between inner and outer is precisely an attempt to escape such reductionism. Take the case of psychology itself. As we saw in chapter 1, this seems a paradoxical science for the object of its investigations, the inner. By its nature, defies observation. Should we therefore conclude that the proper object of psychology is behavior and not human states of mind? Consider what actually happens in the laboratory. If someone does a psychological experiment, what will he report? What the subject says, what he does, what has happened to him in the past, and how he reacted to it, and not what the subject thinks, what he sees, feels, believes, experiences. The opposition here is misleading, for the two accounts are different representations of the same thing. It is a bit like suggesting that describing a painting involves describing an array of colors and shapes, but not what someone looking at it sees. Although the two descriptions have different forms and uses, there's no clash between them. Furthermore, it is quite clear which would normally be of more interests to us. The notion of behavior only becomes reductive if it is construed in a narrow way. Wittgenstein, however, uses it in the widest possible sense to include all we say and do and the context of those actions. In this sense, there's nothing more than behavior. What the concepts of the inner do, however, is underline the particular nature of our interest in behavior. For we are not simply interested in it as the occurrence of a particular physical event. Rather, it has interest for us as the action of human being, as something which has to be understood as the expression of a continuous flow of thoughts, experiences, feelings, etc. And here we have a wonderful thing. Thus, the dichotomy between idealism and materialism breaks down. When I report he was put out, am I reporting a behavior or a state of mind? When I say the sky looks threatening, am I talking about the present or the future? Both, but not side by side, rather one in one sense and the other in another. But what does this mean? Is this not a mythology? No. The difficulty is the narrowness of our philosophical view, for we want to treat the inner either as a thing, albeit a strange and ghostly thing, or as a nothing. By contrast, Wittgenstein stresses that the inner is a different kind of concept altogether. Am I saying something like, and the soul itself is merely something about the body? No. The idea that we are only interested in behavior is, in a sense, rather ironic, for one could easily turn it on its head and say, we are not interested in the individual's behavior at all, except insofar as it shows what she was thinking and feeling, etc. Thus, our relation to others is not a relation to bodies which mysteriously act thus and so. Rather, it is a relation to human beings, and one way the distinctiveness of this relationship expresses itself is in terms of the concept of the inner. We want to know not just what the other person did and said, but what went on inside her. Although Wittgenstein refers to the concept of the inner as a picture, this is certainly not intended to deny the reality of what it expresses. He is not saying that on the investigation the inner turns out merely to be a metaphor. On the contrary, he emphasizes that the picture and the concept structure of our whole relation to others if someone asks, what then is the inner? If it is not something about the body, the question itself contains an error, for it assumes that every substantive must refer to a thing, rather than asking, what is the inner? It is more enlightening to ask, what difference does it make to say of someone that she has an inner, as opposed to saying that she's an automaton? This brings out the fact that in talking of someone as having an inner, we view her actions as those of a thinking being. That is to say, as expressing desires and feelings which make sense against a wider background of thoughts and experiences. In other words, the notion of the inner brings into play a whole network of concepts which would otherwise have no place. In doing so, it changes our attitude and relationship to the being concerned, or rather the very fact of talking of an inner itself expresses and embodies the special nature of our relationship to a person. Well, it's fantastic. It goes to show that the inner is something, it could be called a concept, but do not misuse it as a generality. Do not come to think it is here, there, everywhere. No, the inner is a vague hinter at something that is much more undecidable, geographically, spatially. It is the whole complexity of our interrelationship between ourselves, others, the world out there, and of course above all our desires, action, wants, reactions, emotions, memories, understandings. Can you just get a glimpse of the enormous complexity that is beneath all these things? Unstoppably complex and way more advanced and fantastic than ever implied by the crude chopping up of the world in something inner and outer that doesn't really fit anything in our world or in actions. Why, I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant night or day or wherever you are. Bye. Have I end 16:30.